After 1 week off, Washington is back inside the top 25.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, it's great to have you back. We had a fantastic show with our guy Jake Butt yesterday. We appreciate him. Hope to see him out here in Seattle again very, very soon. And we've got a super fun show for all the everydayers. We're going to be talking about Washington's game plan in week 2 and might feature a lot more passing. We're going to talk about just some of the things that we're most excited about, just about this team after seeing them in person for 1 week. And that's after Washington is officially ranked again in the coaches poll. They snuck in there at number 25, and that's just a really good sign. And it's credit to this team for the way they showed up and the way they look.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look across the landscape of college football, if Washington's a top 25 or top 20 team until it's the end of September, like that's fair. I mean, you look at Florida State, you look at what some other teams have done in the first week of football. Nobody's truly like at their best yet. But I think if you look at what Washington was able to accomplish against Weber State, again, when you put it in the context of it's an FCS opponent, certainly a quarterback that's, still relatively green. I know he got starts at the end of last season, but that was his freshman season. So it's not like he's, a veteran quarterback like what Washington will see this coming week, which we'll talk about later. But they did enough to show, we put our opponent in the way. And again, it took our offense a little bit to get going. And that is what it is for various reasons. But you did enough to show, look, Washington's still a top 25 team. Where and how high, I don't know, but they're top 25 worthy. So again, where do you put them? We'll just throw them in at the end. It's sure. Fair to say, because as Washington continues to go on, and as we expect them to beat Eastern Michigan and beat Washington State and potentially end the month 5-0, then like Washington should be there at some point, regardless. And again, where, how high, who knows? And I'm not by no means is this a top 10 team, or I would even say top 15, but top 20 is probably fair in terms of where they could end up at the end of the season.
For sure. And it's something when you look at just like the expectations coming in, it's a nice start. It's great to see them recognized. And like you look over at the AP poll and they're still sitting in the others receiving votes category. It looks like they actually moved down a slot or two, which is a little frustrating. And, seeing Colorado get a vote when they didn't really deserve it is a whole different conversation. But it's something where it's nice. Like, I know people put a lot more stock into the AP poll than they do the coaches poll, but it's, just the fact that you're getting ranked after everything and just after 1 week of all this is a good sign moving forward. And like, obviously we talked a lot about him over the last couple of days. Jonah Coleman certainly deserves just a lot of credit for that. You think about this defense, you think about just everything that this team can potentially be after a couple of weeks of gelling, after a couple of weeks of working all together and figuring everything out. But one thing that I just really want to harp on, Lars, is just everything with this defense, where this defense really is going to take this team places where, we've got a lot of everydayers in the comments saying, I thought the push here could have been better. The push there could have been better. It still felt relatively vanilla from everything that we saw, in terms of, like, we saw a couple of the same stunts that really gave the offensive line problems. And all those stunts turned into pressures. Like the Alfonso Tupatala sack was one of those. There were a couple ones where Zach Durfee almost hit home, or Isaiah Ward had a really nice day, where a bunch of these, like the exotic looks, like that zero down front that we saw a couple of times. Those are the things that we saw in fall camp, especially, that we want to see more of. There are other things and other stunts and other ways that guys were used that we haven't seen yet, that I can't wait for Steve Belichick to finally say, let's throw this out there right now. We need to stop. We need to sack. And I don't know if that's going to come this week, if it's going to, wait till the start of Big Ten play, but whenever that is, that's something that I think this team really still has another gear that they can hit, especially on that side of the ball, that I'm just truly, I can't wait to see.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of in a way more for our second segment, but it's a reason why also to the kind of current segment being in the top 25 is the fact that Washington still hasn't played at their fullest, highest potential. Like, if you look on the offense, we'll carry on the defensive side first. When I asked Steve Belichick about Jayvon Parker and Logan Sagapolu only played 4 snaps in the opener.
Yeah.
Like, he played way more snaps than that in fall camp, and he didn't appear to be injured. And that was kind of half the question I was asking, like, hey, kind of just fishing for a Logan Sagapollo response here. And if you say, oh, he came out and he was kind of dinged up or whatever, so be it. But that didn't seem to be the case. And kind of what Belichick said is, by week to week, we'll start to add more and more and start to show who we truly are. And so I think that's kind of why Washington, to your point about the AP poll, being the quote unquote more authority, they also took a pretty significant jump. I think it was 26, or I don't think it was top 25, but they might be in that ballpark on the ESPN FPI, which I know some people also, like a lot, and for various reasons don't like ESPN. So, all these are kind of just generic. They don't mean anything. Like truly the polls don't mean anything until mid-October. That's when they start to matter. That's more so for the CFP playoffs, but also, the generic top 25, you have more of a feel for who your team is. But on the offensive side, like, you didn't have Jeremiah Hunter as much. Now that wasn't for an injury. That was just, maybe
we'll get to that later. I have plenty of thoughts on that.
But exactly. And so, but kind of just tying all of it together. And so Washington should be like, they're probably between 25 to 30 right now. That's sure. Where I would put Washington at. So if you happen to put them at 25, great, cool. Like the coaches will did. If you happen to probably put them, I think probably in that 29, 30, maybe 31, 32 mix that the AP poll has, or the unofficially, because again, you're talking about receiving votes and where do those stack up and all the things. Okay, yeah, but we also still haven't seen Washington at their fullest potential. And I think also once this team has a full month under their belt, so again, this even after this weekend, you're still only like 2 loops into the belt. You haven't gotten the belt all the way around and strapped in. It's like, okay, now I know how this feels, how this fits, how this works. Versus now you're going, oh yeah, okay, we made it through the initial part, but it's like, yeah, you don't really know if the belt's going to fit once you put it through the first 2 loops. It's like that just means you don't have like this much to work with. And we knew this roster was talented. That's kind of why the argument is to be made of why they're a top 25 team. It's look, Zach Durfee had an impact on it. And again, not all of it showed in the stats. And that's kind of why I mentioned Jeremiah Hunter on offense, where if this receiving trio can actually turn into a trio. Now again, Giles Jackson also plays a role in that, 10 catches, 10 targets, 98, almost 100 yards. So again, but you could still have more in the. I mean, Wilt has historically been able to throw between 35 and 4,200 yards. So he's good in that ballpark. You're not talking about a quarterback who, like Seneca Wallace, where we got to baby him and we're lucky to get to 2,500 yards. Like no, Jed, there's a reason why he won the job. Aside from he's a veteran, like he's a good quarterback, so he can really throw for more than 250. But it's a matter of how does the defense get those stops early so the offense can get more plays and potentially more drives? It all kind of feeds together. But again, we're still talking about a 35-3 blowout. Now, again, it's Weber State, so that should happen. But again, it's a mixture of we still don't know. Again, like we're saying, we don't know what Washington is, but we know they're good enough. Like they're an above 500 team. Like they're how far above 500? How far above 500 is really the question at this point.
Which just kind of validates what we've been saying all offseason, right? Where our whole point is, this team is good. Like there's a lot to like. There's a lot to be excited about. It's going to take some time to gel. And it felt like it was going to take some time for everybody to see that. And, one thing that Jake pointed out really nicely on yesterday's show was that's something that being in the Big Ten and being in this new national media market of college football is going to provide is a little bit more or just attention really, and just more eyeballs and more on this program, which is something you really like to see. And Lars, speaking of things to get excited about, there's a lot that that both of us really are excited about going into week 2, which we'll get to right after a message from our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Roll out parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So, Lars, what's one thing you're really excited about heading into week 2?
If we're taking Washington and the coaches and players at their word, and that's the worst they can get in terms of a run game, sweet, that works for me. Because I know as I kind of wrapped up the end of last segment saying Will Rogers can get better. the whole offense can get better. And I think that'll make the job easier for Will. And we talk about, and that can also mean Will gets maybe more passing yards through checkdowns to Jonah, to Adam, to Cam Davis. It's one thing I asked Cam Davis about on Tuesday, which was, hey, what do you kind of see your role as in this offense? What's the running back role? Because we know kind of what Jonah is, but what's the guys behind him? What are you and Adam supposed to do? And it's like, kind of do the same thing as Jonah, do it all. Like, that's what this offense asks for out of the running back position. You have to run block. You have to, ideally be able to get out in space and catch a ball. And, again, obviously do the job the running back should do, which is run the ball pretty well, which they all did. But it still could also get better. And I say that to also say, once the offensive line gets sorted out, that will also kind of smooth things out for the run game because, again, aside from Quentin Moore's holding call, which we'll, just gloss over on that wiped away Jonah's first 44-yard touchdown run, the offensive line was opening holes, but it wasn't necessarily consistently. And once there would be either a false start or a holding or whatever the case may be, it kind of seemed to stall out the drive. It's like once they have the momentum at their sails, then they're off to the races. But it's kind of a matter of getting the wind at their sails seems to be the offense's problem. But again, it's also week 1 going into week 2, and this offense still isn't even going to be a final product after week 2.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that, that leads into one thing that I'm really excited about, where I feel like as much as Damon Williams has been the talk of Twitter in terms of true freshmen that people are excited about, Adam Mohammed looked the best out of any true freshman. And one thing just to play off your point there, Lars, is I'm really excited to see what his role is going to grow into in week 2. Where one of the things that we're going to talk about a lot in the third segment is a look that Eastern Michigan likes to throw at opposing offenses, as Brendan Carroll told us, is if Washington is going to be an 11 personnel, they're going to counter with the standard 4-3, where that's 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, where that's, and one reason we're going to get into a little bit more of that later on is that could lead to more potential opportunities throwing the football and a lot of one-on-one coverage, a lot of things like that. But one thing that I'm really excited about in terms of for Adam is exactly what you said. Those checkdowns, those getting the ball into these guys' hands where, when we talked to Cam Davis on Tuesday, one thing he said was, I'm excited about that challenge because one of my biggest jobs as a running back, the biggest job as a running back, is to make the first guy miss, never go down on first contact. And he got 2 carries. It took him for 39 yards, but Adam Mohammed showed he's pretty good at that. So I'm really excited to see what that role is going to look like and if it's going to continue to grow over the course of the year because, Jed Fish told us he doesn't like redshirting a lot of guys is not in his plan. That's not what his program does, as he said. And I feel like Adam is just kind of at the top of that list right now in terms of guys that you look at and say, yeah, that dude's not redshirting.
What's funny? As you were saying that and the point you were making about, you're talking about having 3 linebackers in a 4-3, the evolution of college football and I guess being accustomed to Steve Belichick and the exotic things that he likes to do, having those versatile safety linebackers playing in those 2 opposite safety or middle outside linebacker roles or middle inside linebacker roles. So not the middle guy, but the 2 guys next to him. Yeah. Kamori House. And that leads me to Kamori House is a guy who got some time as a freshman on the other side of the ball. Guy we've been high on. I think that's another guy where when you look at the linebacker position, again, Zoe and Carson and Drew are going to make it pretty hard. And Anthony Ward, to his credit, also had a good first game. So it's going to be hard to crack that depth at safety, or linebacker, which I think is why playing on special teams might become more of a thing for him as he gets his feet wet. And so that was, we're talking about freshmen kind of just carrying on to the other side of the ball there because we didn't see a ton. I mean, I know Rashawn Clark got in there. I don't believe Caleb Presley ended up getting in. I think he got in.
I don't remember seeing him. He could have. I haven't checked the full snap counts yet.
It's funny. I actually did, but I can't remember. The point being, it wasn't. Keep it in because it wasn't indicative. It was more indicative. Okay, well, Caleb, if I'm asking if he played, he clearly didn't play that much. And so I'm curious to see on defense how does that ring true because when you look at the fact that I mentioned Logan Sagapolu and Jayvon Parker still didn't play. So Lennius Davis got some run as a sophomore. Redshirt freshman. Redshirt freshman. Curly Reed got some run as well. And so there were a number of those guys that kind of like, okay, they're kind of in that next wave of above the freshmen that, signed this past spring, but, didn't really do anything last year. Okay, there's kind of a gap there, but there's still also kind of more to be desired from that position because, again, at least for the next 2 games, when you get into Big Ten play, then I can probably see some guys' roles being limited unless injuries come up and things like that. And also, kind of biggest things to be excited about the injuries, like nobody, like aside from Quinn Moore, like which I guess is his own, like that's unfortunate, but like nobody, there was no real, like you're getting more waves back. Like Landon still can probably work his way back to full strength. Jayvon Parker's coming back. Logan Sagapolo, it's not an injury, but you're still adding more guys back that you see.
Leroy Bryant too. Sorry, on that same note, Leroy Bryant. Yeah.
And so I'm like, again, I'm not brushing aside Quentin's injury. I'm just saying there's more wind at your sail. You're getting more guys that are going to be impactful players potentially back than you are coming out of week one, which is always, I mean, like if you're excited about anything, like the way Steve Belichick answered my question is like, no, we got the win. I'm not disappointed. Like it wasn't like a 35-30 game. It was 35-3. Like who cares that I gave up 5 points? I'm like, no, so I just wanted to see if you would laugh and engage with me for the end of your final question, and he did, to his credit, which I think is almost a good way of saying it. We should also be excited about the fact that Steve's getting more comfortable, but we still haven't seen everything yet. And I think that's kind of everything we're saying is it's like, just imagine what this defense can be after looking like that, even albeit an FCS opponent, as they get all these guys back and you really start to see what this defense can do once it's fully shown.
Absolutely. And that's something I'm really excited about. Jayvon Parker being like the prime example for me personally of just guys where it's, when that dude's healthy, when he's ready, it's going to add a lot where, like I said a little earlier, the Thaddeus was saying, hey, where's that interior defensive line push? Where we saw some really nice snaps from Sebastian Valdez. We saw some really nice snaps from Bryce Butler. A guy who's going to really help all that is Jayvon Parker. And that's, no knock on Alenius Davis or Logan Sagapolo or Jacob Bandis or anybody else who played at that position, but those are the guys we expect to have that role. Where when you think Jacob Bandis, you think a guy who's going to be primarily a run stopper. Same with Logan. And, Alenius Davis has kind of been brought in that role as well. I think that could continue to evolve, but that's what we've seen from him so far. So I'm really excited about that because that's just going to add so much to this pass rush. Where, one of our bold predictions was there's going to be a whole bunch of turnovers. We're not going to say which one of us was wrong about that. It definitely wasn't, me. I'm just fine. But when, but one of those things is that pass rush is going to continue to evolve. And it's not just in terms of the scheme, like I was saying earlier, it's in terms of guys playing comfortable, guys figuring themselves out, because that's one of the biggest things where Lars, like, is it any surprise to you, the guys that look the most comfortable, where I'm not saying the other guys didn't, but the guys who look the most comfortable in terms of rushing the passer, in terms of just playing within themselves, are the two guys who had the most overall, or the three guys who had the most overall snaps, and that's Sebastian Valdez, that's Isaiah Ward, and that's Voight Nufi. Which again, it's not a knock on the other guys, but those guys who have the most snaps and the most experience looked like it. And I'm not saying the other guys didn't, but I'm saying as those guys continue to grow and continue to be more comfortable and take more steps and feel themselves out and know what they can do, it's going to continue to look better.
Thaddeus Dixon had the most cornerbacks
example.
And that, like, he had, when you look at the snap difference between him and Ephesians Prysock and how good Ephesians Prysock is and was Saturday, that'll tell you something. Like, it's like, hey, we need, like, that's the leader of the room. Like, hey, we need, like, those veteran guys that are, and that's the reason why Thaddeus is even more of an impressive example is, like, Ephesians worked with John Richardson last year. Steve Belichick worked with neither of them. He's coming in and looking at, like, football dudes. Who do I want on the field all the time? Thaddeus Dixon. And that's no slight to Ephesians. That's more or less just saying, hey, like, imagine if they get like 60 reps each when you're playing like Big Ten opponents and you're not having some of those substitutions that you do get the chance and privilege to play younger guys when you're playing lesser games, still FCS opponent, and they handled them properly. Because again, maybe there's a team down south that didn't. And so, like, I'm not saying like my prediction was wrong. I'm just, more or less saying like it's week one and anything could happen. But the fact that they handled them so well, it's kind of going to lead into a way, and what help you lead into it a little today. How much better can this offense get? Like, because we know what the run game can be. Like we talked about, biggest thing to be excited about: Adam Mohammed, Jonah Coleman, everybody. The list goes on. Cam Davis. How much better can that good old kid from Mississippi get?
That's just a perfect segue. Let's get there. right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel, because you've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot. America's number one sportsbook. We'll have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 to get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's number one sportsbook. And we still haven't decided on an official Locked On Huskies team for the year, but I think the best bet right now in terms of, you're looking at FanDuel, you're looking at some of those odds, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because that is a really weak NFC South. If Michael Penix, ends up having to take over, maybe we'll revisit some things here for obvious reasons. But right now, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tampa Bay Washington Huskies, whatever you want to call them, they look like they're in a really, really good position to win that weak division. And you should certainly go check out their odds over on FanDuel. So, Lars, the number one way that Washington's passing offense can improve is by getting more reps, by getting all these guys out there on the field together, doing a whole bunch of things. And that's the number one thing there, is involving Jeremiah Hunter, where he only got a couple of targets, but I'm really curious about how this is going to look, because as we said a little bit earlier, the way Eastern Michigan, or at least what they've shown, the way they want to play defense is probably by rushing the passer a decent amount, by getting some of those bigger bodies into the backfield quickly, especially on, some of these third and long, some of these obvious passing downs, which is going to leave one of the wide receivers probably in coverage against a safety, depending on if it's man or not, and somebody who's going to really thrive in single coverage is Jeremiah Hunter. Like, all these guys are really good at it, but it feels like there is going to be an added emphasis on getting Jeremiah Hunter the ball early and often in this game.
See, I agree with the principle, but the premise is solely dependent on, can the offensive line hold up against what's shown to be, at least in week one, a decent pass rush. Like, that's kind of like in a way, like the question is, like, will they throw more? Is, can the offensive line protect more? Because when Will had a clean pocket, he was able, for the most part, to find a guy, at least, and to your point, in the check down. So that's where it could come into play. But against a better pass rush, is he able? Because we saw at times, again, the one to Jeremiah over the middle was a little concerning. But we saw him get rid of the ball when he needed to, except in, those 2 sacks in the end of the first half, where he literally just ran right there and took it.
Well, no, sorry, I don't necessarily care. And I don't mean that to refute your point. I'm just saying it's more of a game plan thing, where if the plan is, let's get the ball in his hands, you can do that quickly. You can do that to negate a pass rush, where if it's a screen, if it's a quick slant, if it's a drag, there are so many different ways where you can do that to negate the best pass rushes. And that's kind of more of what I'm saying there, where, yeah, for sure, if they're rushing for, and they're dropping into a zone coverage or anything like that, it's, obviously you want to see how the offensive line holds up, you want to see what it looks like, but there are so many ways to negate that no matter what. And it just feels like there's going to be an added emphasis on that with Jeremiah in particular, who's shown he can if Will just wants to get the ball out quickly, he's shown he can win in tight coverage and win those contested catches more often than not. So I just think there are more ways to get him the ball than just, if the pocket stays clean. Again, not to refute your point, but I think there are ways to do that.
No, and I agree. Actually, what's funny about that? It has nothing to do with Will. Jed's offense. Jed calling the plays. So it's, how does Jed find a way to get the offense either A, more snaps, or B, the ball in the hand of Wilmore? Because here's the thing. He knew for a fact he could have done more check down. I think that, for sure. I think Jed, I'm not refuting your point. I'm just saying, is it on the coaching, or is it more on what the opposing defense was doing to scheme? Because I have a hard time believing Washington's receivers couldn't get off against Weber State. Like, there was seeming to be, like, again, it wasn't terrible coverage, but it wasn't like anything that, especially two seniors and a talented sophomore can't handle. But for me, I just think the offensive line, like, look at their first touchdown drive against Weber State. What was the key in all of it? Running the ball.
The offensive line?
Well, no, switching on the offensive line and running the ball. I think that's the thing for Jed. Is it's like, crap. If we're taking a dicey proposition with protecting the quarterback, just run the ball. Now, again, to your point, you can also check the ball down more. I just think like Will get more opportunities once the offensive line is able to protect a little more. And Jed, I think, has more confidence in the offensive line. I think that's also something to consider. Jed was doing that after making those in-game adjustments and flipping 3 offensive linemen to 3 different positions. I think at that point, as an offensive play caller, you're like, look, let's just make sure Jonah doesn't fumble the ball. And by the way, nobody had a fumble this year in that regard. So, like, hey, let's just run the ball. And if you got the offensive line can do that, we can get out of here with a win. And that's basically kind of what they did. Will still took his shots, in moments, but there was only 1 or 2 deep shots. And the rest of
there weren't a ton.
He flat because he didn't have time. Jed knows he doesn't have time. Like that, otherwise, why would he not? Because Will threw deep at Mississippi State.
Yeah, for sure. But you think about that, like that deep out to Giles, he did have time. He did, and the ball came out late. Like if you go and you rewatch it, the ball came out late. Where if that ball's out earlier, Giles might score on that play. But I don't necessarily think where it's that. Where, yeah, there were certainly some times where Weber State was in the backfield, and again, it was not perfect. It was not clean. But I don't think that's necessarily the biggest thing here, where some of it is still getting comfortable in a new offense, where, yeah, you can rep these things as many times as you want, but it's still going to look different in your first game against a live defense. As much as you want to say, yeah, practice reps are really important. They are extremely important, but there's something different about repping it in a game against a different colored jersey.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. Like that's why they made the changes they did up front. Like
yeah.
There was nobody that they brought in that hadn't played significant college football before. Like, right. I mean, I guess Caleb Defy would be in the lone exception in that regard, but I think his snaps were more in the second half, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't remember because when they made those initial switches, there was Drew going to left, not Caleb Defy coming up. It wasn't a 1-for-1 switch in that regard since Max is out. And, I think getting back to the overall question of will they throw the ball more? I mean, the potential is there. It's just a matter of, again, this is going to be a coach speak answer, but will the game allow it? Can the game dictate that happens? And if Eastern Michigan ends up, getting after Will again, Jed's going to, use Adam and Jonah and Cam in different ways. And again, he'll probably do some designed rollouts and get things going to the, trying to avoid certain pass rushes. Because again, Jed knows, and that's why I'm not questioning Jed's ability as the play caller. But I think it's more or less the feeling out process kind of that you mentioned, where once Jed and Will start to have a more in-game feel for each other, because again, Will's played plenty of snaps. Jed coached and called many games, but they haven't together. And that's the difference. And I think it's what it's not, but again, it's almost like the NFL preseason. It's why you play these non-conference games against teams that you're probably still going to beat, but you could still work some things out in versus facing like Georgia to open the season or some actual team that like, oh, we got to get up for this one.
So Lars, I have a question for you, just based on something that we didn't see on Saturday that you and I saw a lot of in spring camp and in fall camp, especially when you talk about different roles and the running backs. What is that one thing that, if you can think of it off the top of your head, that we didn't see on Saturday that we did throughout fall camp?
Aside from checkdowns
Aside from checkdowns, yeah.
That's a good question. What do you see it as?
We didn't see running backs split out wide. We did not see a lot of that throughout the course of the first game, where that's also something that I'm playing into here, where we watched how shifty and how impressive Jonah was in space. We've seen him do that lined up as the X receiver, man, where there are a lot of different ways that and like, obviously we wanted to harp on Jeremiah because we've gotten a lot of questions about that. Got a lot of questions saying, hey, like, what's that going to look like with him? Where is this something to be concerned about? And you and I we said it earlier this week. No, that's not something we're concerned about, but it's still something to note. And it's the same thing there, where we didn't see a lot of that. And it's something we have seen before. We know it's something they have in their bag, and that's something that they're going to go to at some point. And if you're going to counter that, why not, split them out wide and see if a linebacker is going to go out there and cover them? Where that's something where all of a sudden, all right, you got a little bit of a mismatch there. There are ways to make it work with the passing game. And, I'm going to certainly harp on this when we get to our bold prediction side of this week. But if we look back at the Eastern Michigan game and Will Rogers has, let's just say 35, 36 pass attempts, I'm not going to be shocked.
No, and I again like to almost not repeat my own point earlier, but it's like the thing about Jed getting better. It's maybe that was his intent was look, like, I'm going to prove to you I can call a vanilla offense. Steve can call a vanilla defense, and we'll still get out of here with a blowout win. I think that again speaks to what more of the point we were also saying throughout the spring and summer was this is a elite in-game coaching staff. Like they know, like I think that's kind of the point. Like they can make those 3 or 4 offensive line changes. By the way, drive by drive, not just okay. Now you're finishing the game at left tackle. No, it's hey, we're kind of rotating and playing musical chairs here. Drive by drive on the fly, not a drive by, but a drive by drive on the fly. So it's one of those where if they can do that in game, that really proves how well these guys can coach and scheme things up. So it's almost to say like. Also worth noting, we haven't seen the full offense, so I think it's like, hey, look, it's a good first game for Will. It gets over 250. The reason why I was laughing at the beginning of the segment was because I looked up the numbers and Cade McNamara at Iowa threw for 251, so I just thought that was hilarious. But
didn't look that way.
No, exactly. But it's like the whole point of week 1 is you get out of there with a convincing win. You're not like, oh man, we had to squeak that one out. But there's also still plenty more to unpack. Like, what do you think? The offense was like 60%.
Something like that. Yeah, that's
probably perception. And so if this weekend we see 75, 80%, yeah, cool.
Sure.
Will Rogers is going to be a significant reason why, to the whole point.
Absolutely. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support, and thank you for making Locked On Huskies your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast from NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors. Our guy, Spencer McLaughlin, gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And please make sure you also go check out the Locked On Huskies Insider Program. The link to that is down in the description below. We're doing so much fun stuff over there. You get a 2-week free trial, and after that, it's $4.99 a month. We're dropping exclusive rumors, game day stuff. We're dropping our the injury report as soon as we get it over there first. And then there's so much other fun stuff. You get access to an exclusive Q&A. We're going to probably do another one of those later this month, maybe around the time of the Apple Cup. So that's something that we got a lot of really nice feedback on. So if you want to go check that out, again, the link is down in the description below. You also get the opportunity to chat with us one-on-one and so many other fun, cool features that we're still updating, still working on, because we want to make it the best possible experience for all of the everydayers. So that's a lot of fun. And now that we're back in season, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel to new content every single day. So make sure you hit that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. You have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, please make sure that you drop them right down in the comment section below. And if you're audio only, make sure you leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.